Okay, before the break was a bunch of course policies, syllabus, sort of preview on things. Mostly what we're going to be doing in this course is using HTML and CSS. We'll look at a little bit of JavaScript at the end, which finishes out the HTML 5 point something, I think 5.1, 5.2, 5 point something standard. HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So we'll be writing code. Not scripting code, these are more, there's a word I'm going to use, but I'll wait till it shows up in lecture. The language is already built, so even when we do things that change, like when we get to doing animations with CSS, we don't sit there and hard code it all the way through like we would if we were coding in, say, C++. There's some keywords we use to ask for pre-built animations and just pass in some parameters they need. So it's a lot more of an encoding thing. And that's the big advantage with HTML. I want to start off with that right now. I'm going to write something on the board. I think everybody's aware that in the machine itself, it's a large collection of switches. So switches can be on and off. I'm just going to make something up 1 0 0 0 1 1 0 1 1 1 0 0 1. I just completely made that up. Because I have enough on there. I'll make a note here. Made up, that's just some ones and zeros I can put marks around while they're here on the board. So when things pass through a machine in the central processing unit, the registers, your RAM, the arithmetic logic unit, all of that stuff, as it's passing through the processor, in particular in RAM, it's kept in a certain format. And same thing with, similar with registers. RAM is the current program that's running, and registers are the current step that is running. But both of them volatile memory. But those ones and zeros come in a certain order so that the machine knows what the data is. And if you had the SDEV 120 class or one of the classes where that was covered, you probably covered integers. And they'd say stuff like 1 0 1 0. Or more the number that is. I don't hear anybody answer. That's the same as 10 in base 10. We have an 8's column, a 4's column, a 2's column, and a 1's column. Just like we do with our normal numbers. We're not really going to look into that now. We have there's an 8, there's not any 4s, there's a 2. Not any 1. So we add those together just like we do with we have more digits in base 10, but we still have those columns. That's for another class, but that's what's covered in that other class. I don't really know how computers work. If you're in C++, you can access a data type called U_int. Oh, wait. U_int_8. And that's the one you learned about in the other class. But computers have other stuff going on. There's more than just that introduction level, introduction to binary code, usually isn't what's happening on the inside of the machine. There's more going on, like there's a huge hard drive full of ones and zeros. How does the computer know where a piece of data starts and where it stops? Especially if it's like string-based data. And a bunch of words, strings being a string of characters, it's a technical term for it, written language. In our written language, all the words are different lengths, and the sentences are going to be made of different numbers of words, different combinations. Multiple sentences go together. So how can a computer tell where one starts and where one stops and the next one starts? Or if there's background information, like what color to show. So that's kept in certain ways. And again, I'm just making up to mark these ones and zeros. I just made up that string of ones and zeros to put here. But maybe these first 4 bits, let's do 3. These first 3 bits are what the computer recognizes as a start pattern. And then to balance that out at the end, these 3 bits are a stop pattern. and the computer's going to recognize that it's probably going to be more than 3 bits to indicate start and stop. That way it doesn't get confused. But in general, the beginning of the data we actually want, there's going to be a marker that says start here. And somewhere later, there's another marker that says stop here. Then we might have some metadata about it. And internally, that's kept at the front. So that's not our data, that's data about our data. So a good introduction, you'll have a better idea by the end. We'll explicitly be creating metadata. But a good introduction, think about the color. We don't just want to show this data, but we want to show it in red. So data about our data. And then we have our actual data. And then the start part. So that's how things pass through RAM. And that's how things come out of RAM and move from RAM to the CPUs and registers and all of that in processing. And that order is what's important. So I just made up those ones and zeros, but start of data, metadata, the data itself, then the end of the data. We're studying HTML, hypertext markup language. Write that up here. Hypertext, I guess I should make that capital T. Markup language. But anybody's had a few software development classes has probably seen those letters ML show up in multiple places. So right now, just talking about markup languages in general. So marking up, we take our data and then we add special marks to it to convey information to the computer. And what we'll be doing with HTML and a couple others that we'll look at throughout the semester, just periodically, we use what we call tags for the markup. And a tag is just a special symbol. I'm just going to write tag because this is a completely generic one that we put in angle brackets. Some of you all have gone a little bit further than others and have encountered generics. It is not a coincidence that we use the symbol for generics for our tags. It is the complete opposite of a coincidence that it's the same symbol we use for generics for anybody who's dealt with generics. This is saying what type of data we have for those who have seen it. But for those starting off, we're going to put these special characters. The angle brackets, greater than, less than, as they call them in math class. More or less, as we call them in normal English outside of math class, bigger, smaller. But those symbols with some sort of word to indicate what type of data we have. Then we have our actual data. And I just now realized I'm writing with a green pen. Does anybody have any trouble seeing colors? Like color blindness? Any pens that I need to throw into the trash can? Okay, I'll finish this out in a green pen. That way there's not strange color coding. I started with black and somehow switched over to this, and it took me a minute to realize that. Hey, I hate to be up here writing if there's somebody that can't see green. I've heard blue is the worst on the board. People that have the color blindness, it's hard to see blue. They say might as well be writing with a white marker on a whiteboard. I always like to try to ask that question and throw any markers that I don't need right in the trash can. So this we call this an opening tag. That's where our data indicates where our data starts. And then we put another tag at the end, which will have the same name and those angle brackets, but we add a slash here, a forward slash. So the start and stop tags. Our data starts here and stops here. And it includes things. And I guess I can add a little bit of space here. Let me move this over just a little. Maybe we want this to show in red. So we add in what's called an attribute into the opening tag to say that this text needs to show in red. But that form, so this is what we're going to be writing. Let me go back to that black marker so you can actually see it. You notice the similarity. This is what's called an opening tag. So that's where our data starts. And inside of that opening tag, we also have data about our data. So we have attributes, which are kind of like metadata, because it's other data just related to our data. Then we have our actual data, and then we have special characters to show where it ends. We call this the closing tag. Or we speak English, we're used to synonyms. People will know what you mean if you say start and end tag. But technically we should be calling them the opening and closing tag. But notice the order that goes in. And these markup languages, this style of markup language, HTML, XML, I'll come back and talk about some other ones. We're going to be looking at hypertext markup language. This is also encoded in Unicode, which is like that introduction to binary code we would have seen in another class where we get a number. Like we can write our numbers out. We can just do a simple encoding and say, okay, this number means 65 means capital A, 66 means capital B, and we can encode things directly. So this is one of our simplest types of encoding, and notice that order. Start, metadata, actual data, end. So it's human readable and lines up very, very nicely with what the machine is actually doing. So there are some big advantages to it. We get, it's still the human readable and good for the machine both. A little bit extra typing on the human part. If we were to pass this data around as JSON, there would be less typing for the human, but then the machine has to do a whole lot more. So markup languages give us a nice little balance there. And that's what we're going to set those up. Start to write in binary. If anybody hasn't seen that, I'll throw something in at the end of the lecture, just a very, very quick, show the basic numbers, how it corresponds. If anybody wants to do that, let me know. We won't be doing much in binary. I just made up a string to kind of make this point. This is the advantage we get of markup languages. So some of you all have had other programming classes, especially where you got into object-oriented programming. You should have heard the little addendum that object-oriented programming is harmful for the machine. It's a very, very mean thing to do to a machine. It's just good for a human. It's better for the human. The programmer can do it way, way more. But we lose efficiency when we do that. So a lot of times markup languages can be used to buy back some of the efficiency we lose with object-oriented programming. You'll often see it used that way. It's also just a good way to transfer data because every piece of data says what type of data it is, has metadata about it, has the actual data, and it has its start and stop point, the order that it moves through a machine in. So a good format, it's a good balance, and that's what was chosen for the standard for making websites. I have some background on that, but I've teaching this class a few times. I know most people are ready to get started and do something. So the first thing I want to look at is let's just make a simple, throw some words on a website so we can do something. That's a concept we'll come back to, especially when we talk about other markup languages. And near the end, I'll look at using tags aren't our only type of markup language. Like markup kind of implies that we add special characters that mean something to the machine, predefined characters. So LaTeX is a good example of that you might need. That's the standard to format math properly. Okay. With our keyboard, it's really hard to write things like they look in math class. So there's a markup language we use for that, LaTeX. You may have seen it spelled out, but the X, that's not an X, that's supposed to be the Greek letter chi, which was where that started with. People kept telling the guy to use an X, and he got really, really mad because he's like, This is a huge math paper. X is written all over the place. I think you're right, actually writing that high. So we'll talk about that later. For now, let's jump into what our course is about. So the HTML, and we'll get into the CSS soon. So I'll share my screen. And one of the setup instructions, it might not have been there. To write this, we write our HTML in a simple text editor, the simplest text editor you can find. Well, the simplest text editor you can find is probably like Notepad or Wrangler if you're on a Mac. Right, Notepad is just the thing that's like a typewriter. Just the most basic thing. You have to type everything. There's no predicted text, but it is just pure Unicode in and out. Every character gets 16 bits, a 16-bit representation of the symbols we use, which is the first 256 of those are ASCII codes. You might hear that used interchangeably. Unicode is an extension of ASCII code. They didn't replace it, they just added on to it. So that's the simplest text editor. It's like a typewriter. We have to type every single word out. You can do that if you want. Sometimes I recommended that before things moved to 8-week classes. I would often recommend that first just to get some practice with it. But we can do better than that. There are a step up on text editors. There are lots of them. And I would recommend trying quite a few because they have different functionality, slight differences. And if you're in this class, you're going to use text editors a lot. This is the field you're going into. Even the big fancy things will put other names on them like IDE. Sometimes I still call those text editors because the software development course, as programmers, what we do is we're writing text and we need to write pure Unicode text. Yes, in the chat room said Adam was retired. That was one of my favorites for a long time. So Adam was a really, really nice one. It was built as a community effort. It's basically somebody went on a repository and started communicating with thousands of programmers around the world and just made it an open call to programmers. What do you want in a text editor? And they made that text editor. It's really, really nice. This was 12 years ago or so. But there's also, that was the first time they did it. So there was definitely lessons learned. So then they came back and made a second one. And well, first thing they did is they didn't make a text editor, they made a framework. They made a bunch of libraries so that a programmer could make the perfect text editor for themselves and just a very minimal number of lines of code. If you've used VS Code, that's basically what VS Code is. VS Code is the default Electron framework, which is what the people made from their lessons learned from Atom, the Atom text editor, and Microsoft just grabbed it and tries to act like it's a Microsoft product. And had a great, the advertising for it's great. People that work at Microsoft in downtime just are supposed to make YouTube tutorials and talk about how great VS Code is for doing that particular thing. So you have probably seen some of those tutorials, right? Those are actually commercials because we don't play commercials for text editors. But it's a nice one, but it's a framework. So other than VS Code, programmers are supposed to be able to just, that's actually a bunch of libraries. So you can build your perfect text editor in under an hour was what they went with for it. And then Microsoft just took the default package and released it and tried to act like it was a big Microsoft product. There are some other things, but Atom text editor got retired, so I no longer have that. For the most part, I will be using the Sublime text editor. This is definitely one of my absolute favorites. One thing about text editors, we can run code in. Right? I keep seeing that people talk about VS Code, you can run code. You can do that in just about any text editor. Oh, let me take that to the extreme. If I go open up a terminal, maybe an Ubuntu terminal, and make a little Python script and open VI, which was back from the 70s. Um, and I'll just print out a Python statement. This is a little side step. Right there. This is from back in the 70s. From at if I let oh, I got a typo or something, but I just ran that from a text editor in the 70s. Being able to run your code in a text editor is not a fancy feature, but for some reason on VS Code they try to advertise that as such. But we've been doing that since the 70s. Most any text editor that's not that core base one, like Notepad on Windows or Text Wrangler on Mac, is going to run things. If you're on a Linux, your core text editor is VI or Nano or something like that. But it's a place to write text. I'll be using Sublime, which you can use for free forever. You download it, use it for free, download the source code, has a lot of nice features. It does have licensing. It's $100 a license right now, and the license is good forever for every version of Sublime Text Editor they ever make. Which, as a student, paying for software sounds rough, right? But if you're in this class, you're probably also heading towards a well-paying career. Something to keep in mind is that when you're making really good software developer money, every year come tax season, you're going to want to make sure and have some nice itemized deductions to put on your taxes. Because otherwise the IRS is going to want a big chunk of that software developer money. Right? Everybody knows that as you're making more money, the percentage of taxes you pay goes up. So it's nice that when you pay for software, it's an itemized deduction. But $100 is kind of on the cheap side, which if you've ever seen things like Visual Studio cost $6,000 per year, that's what's that for. That's why that's there. Because programmers might make $150,000, $200,000 with it and need to be absolutely certain that they're above that. They have some nice size itemized deductions to tell the IRS about. Good business software. But you're going to need a text editor, even a basic one. I go with Sublime. My recommendation, especially if you're starting out here, try a bunch of different ones. Go to Google, search for text editor, and look for like best of list is what I usually recommend. Or that's all. Oh, 15 best text editors for Windows and Mac. So go to that best of list. And this is always my recommendation for software, because then you check that blog and you can see the different things you should be looking for in a particular one. And go through, try different ones out. I will be using Sublime Text Editor for class if you want to use the same one.
I don't know that on this computer.
I don't know if you can on the try it and see if it runs. The computers in the lab here are frozen though too. So every run on the lab computers is like the first run, so that we can experiment freely. That way, if you break something, all you have to do is restart the computer, and it's the first run of the computer again. So you can download it. There should be several ones on there. Let me share that screen and see which ones are on the lab computers here. So you can also remotely access all of these.
Admin username and password to install.
Okay, I can type that in here real quick if you want to use that one. Let me see what else on here. 3D viewer, because I know he's got stuff better than Notepad.
Well, Visual Studio's here. Notepad++.
I think that's the full Visual Studio, but that's the big, huge one. That's much bigger than we need for this class.
Okay.
Is VS Code on there? Oh, Notepad++
Yeah, no.
is a really great one. If you're on a Windows machine, Notepad++ would be one of my top recommendations. It's free, completely open source. It's the BSD license. You can do whatever you want with this software. Color coding, so we call that lexing, where keywords will be recognized and change colors. Really nice ones for there. At one point I asked him to put brackets on here. Is brackets on here? Hey, I don't see any B's. Must not be on here anymore. Oh, VS Code is on here. So if you like VS Code, that's on here on the live computers. There's lots and lots of them out there, and I would recommend trying different ones. Sublime is cross-platform. It is exactly the same cross-platform. I've got to hit the share screen button. If I ever forget to hit the share screen button, please remind me quickly. Anybody on the Zoom call? Sublime is the exact same when I run it on my PC or my Mac or my Chromebook, which I'll probably use all three of them this semester. Everything we're doing here is completely cross-platform. We're writing text files and loading those text files on the internet. So as long as we have a text editor and a browser, that's what we need for this course. There's lots and lots and lots of text editors. You'll want to look into different ones. Notepad++ is an excellent one to start off with. If you're on a Mac, I don't think Notepad++ works perfectly on a Mac. You can probably get it to run, but it might mess up occasionally. But there's lots of different ones. If you go to the Apple Store and look for text editor, I can't think of the name of. There's one that Text Wrangler is the basic one. There's another one I use quite often, but it's good to try them out as long as you have a place to write text. And I stretched that out for a while. Does everybody have a place to write text now? Can I follow along? Okay. So in the text editor, we need to do this thing I was doing on the board. We have some data we want. Well, let's do the standard example. We want to put the words "Hello World" on a web page. I'm just going to write the text, and I'm going to start with that. So okay, there's the text. That's the data. When you hit save, the thing that's going to be different. I didn't realize those pictures were there. Don't look at those pictures. That's my math homework for my graduate studies at ISU. I'm taking automata theory this semester, so those pictures probably look a little overwhelming if you just glance at them. Diagramming how machines work in pure mathematical form. So I didn't realize that picture was going to show on the video when I shared it, but it's working folder. So when we name it, the extension is what matters. If you haven't ever seen that before, the extension is arbitrary. We can make up a new one. We can put whatever we want in any type of file extension, but the part before the dot, right? So a regular text file, we put .txt. What that extension does is tells the computer what it is. So for this class, we want to use HTML, and that's what our extension is going to be. So I'll call this greeting.html. And the part before the dot is for a human. The part after the dot is for a machine. And if you weren't familiar with this, the thing, save as type thing, that is really just a filter. If you wanted to, you could select HTML from there, and then you wouldn't have to type the extension. You can go ahead and type whatever extension you want. So .html. And now if I go to where that file is saved, well, the text showed up on a web page. That's something. But there's not much we can do with it. We gave the computer recognized, okay, that's text. Know what to do with text? Just translate it back to the Unicode character and show the Unicode character. But there's no way we can identify that particular text. So we need to tell, if we wanted to change colors of it, change size, any of that stuff, the computer needs to identify particular parts of text. And that's where the tags come in. So we can wrap that in tags, but I want to add a couple more first. Which I'm going to delete that. You can leave those words and wrap around it. One thing you're going to want to get used to is jumping around. Well, I'll leave it there. Get used to jumping around. That's really small, isn't it? Let me change that. I have to put it here. Font size. Oh, that's the wrong spot. I'll put it up here. Got 18. So, well, I have to come back to and figure out which file I'm supposed to type the settings in. I don't think I have a regulars in here. Oh, I do. Okay, I'll do that. Oh, it's a little bit bigger. With this text editor, I have to go in and use JSON to set up all the settings and stuff. And I meant to do that before class, and I thought I remember doing that. So I either did it on a different computer or I forgot to hit save on the button. But you want to get used to jumping around. So we have those words there. And everybody look at your keyboard. Are you familiar with the home and end keys? Those are two very important keys that you probably never used before programming. You will use those a lot. So you want to get used to those keys. And those are on a different spot on every keyboard. So make sure you know where the home and end is, and that, well, obviously end goes to the end of the line. Home goes to the beginning. If you have home more than once, it toggles back and forth. And before the days of a mouse, we held the shift key to highlight. So if you go to the end of the line, you hold shift and hit home. That's how you highlight stuff without a mouse. I'll work in a bunch of those keyboard shortcuts throughout the semester, remind you of those, because if you look at the keyboard and the mouse, we have 2 to 6 buttons on the mouse and usually 80 to 120 buttons on a keyboard. Obviously, you have way more control with the keyboard, but it takes a long time to learn all the buttons. So home and end are a great one to start with, and hold down shift and the arrow keys and all that to highlight. Be a useful thing. So I'm gonna start writing some HTML code, which in this text editor, there's gonna be predictive text. Is there not? It's supposed to be predictive text. Oh. It didn't show up on the list, but if I type HTML and then hit tab, look at all that code that just popped up. Color coding has meaning. Before long, I'm going to start doing that. That is boilerplate code that we will put in pretty much every single thing we write this semester. But I'm not going to pull it from predictive text yet because I want to talk about what it does. So for at least the first 2 weeks, I'll type it out every time. We need to put tags in to define this data, but we also need some other ones I'm going to go ahead and talk about now because we're going to use them every single time. First off, is we need to tell the computer what type of document it is. We gave the extension .html, but that does not mean we put HTML data in here. We could give it the extension .html, write a bunch of Python code inside it, and then tell the Python interpreter to run it. The extension isn't quite enough. We need something explicit that relates to this data that tells the computer what it is. And these all look the same. So in our first tag, so an angle bracket, then an exclamation mark, we'll write the word .type in all capital letters. And then .type for HTML5 is just HTML. Before HTML5, we put a web address there. We told the computer, we put a big long URL so the computer could go figure out what we were talking about. But once it became an actual standard, we just put HTML. And this line is actually optional, but one of these days the standard will change. And when that standard changes, you will have to come back and put this line in every single HTML file you left it out of, or that website or that web page will no longer show. So it's a whole lot easier to type it in the first time. So it's optional, but not really, unless you want to dig through every web page you ever make and add that later. So you always start off with that, and then we get into our actual tags. So we have some HTML data. That's going to be our opening tag. And then there's predictive text, which I'm just ignoring for now, but you want to type it the first few times to get used to it. And down below, I'm doing another angle bracket and then a forward slash. Oh, well, pretty good. As soon as I hit forward slash, it types it. But it's like, oh, there's an opening HTML tag. We need a closing HTML tag here. And notice how the text editor is able to finish that form. So your super basic text editor won't have that, but you will usually have predictive text and auto completion and the color coding and all that stuff is called lexing. You may have heard the word lexicon of the language. English teachers always talk about that as a noun, but in programming languages, we use it as a verb because we control it and we can change it. Be like, yeah, I don't like those showing in red. I want to make those purple. Do whatever. We have control over it. So we use it as a verb. We call that lexing. Most of your text editors will have it. So now we've defined something about that data. We're going to do a little bit more, but we have that place that shows where the data starts, where it stops, and the actual data in between. Well, we can do even more things. There's two things that we want to put on every page: head and body. And notice how I'm jumping around. The computer needs it in a certain order, but the order the computer needs it in is probably not the order we think about it in. So it's usually more productive to jump around and put it together in the way you think about it in than trying to work left to right, top to bottom. We'll talk about these in detail later. Head is like internal data. That's where we put our metadata. That's where we tell the computer where to find the style sheet or style sheets. We can change those, where to find any dynamic scripting and information about the page. And the body is what shows. So I like to use the word mind and body. Right? If you look at somebody, you see their body, not what's going on in their mind. So the head section is pretty much like the mind of our web page, and then the body is what people see. There's one thing in the head that does show. In the head section, we often do a title tag, and that's what goes in the tag. I'm going to put first example here. First example, and then slash title. Which whenever I hit that forward slash, my predictive text is taking over and finishing up that word. And what that does is that puts it in the title tag. So if I save that and come over here and open this, you can see now up there in the tab that says first example. So that's what the title tag does. That's that, and then the little icon, the picture beside it, the fave icon, it also goes in there. We won't see that for a couple weeks. Week 3, I think. We'll put the little picture there beside it. But otherwise, the head is all internal stuff. And then in the body, we have that. So those have to be everywhere. We'll talk about it soon. I usually like to put another tag in there. We can nest tags inside of that. Notice how that title tag is entirely nested in the head tag. And that head tag is entirely nested in that HTML tag. So here on the board where I wrote actual data, that can include more markup tags, opening and closing, and have an entire element. So that's the word from our opening to closing tag, including the tags, is called an element. So that's mostly what we're working with. And then to identify stuff, we need to put a tag on. So one of our basic ones is going to be a paragraph tag. Some of the ones that came out way back in the early 1990s were abbreviated because RAM was a precious commodity back then. We didn't want to waste RAM on computer experts. So there's lots and lots of abbreviations. Y'all have probably seen remnants of that in the world. But in HTML5, one of the standards is we have really good names for our tags. So they're nice descriptive names. So we want to use those. But paragraph is still one of our basic ones. So that gives us a way to identify that. So I come over here, back to where that's stored, and just double click on it. Should open with the default browser. And one we're going to see before long, pretty much any browser, if you push your F12 button, oh, whoops. Sorry, I messed up the screen share. F12 on mine also goes to airplane mode, so I have to wait till Wi-Fi kicks back on. Okay, there's Wi-Fi. So if I push function F12, so I get F12 and don't accidentally turn the Wi-Fi off during the Zoom call. We get these tools over here. There's debugging tools. So you may have encountered debugging tools, little things to help you find problems for your write code. Those are built into every browser. Usually you can get to it from F12. Right click also works. I believe in almost all of them. In Edge, the very first time you have to give it permission to do that. If you right click and go to inspect or view page source, if you go to view page source, you can see the code itself. But if you right click and go to inspect, you'll get this panel over here, which has lots of debugging tools. Maybe you want to make it look like an iPhone. What's this page look like on an iPhone? XR, that's an old one. It's like Google Chrome needs to update their iPhone emulator, but make it look like something different for testing, or a console. This is more in dynamic stuff. You wanted to print out some echoes to track down a bug. Let's do that. Or you can go to the source code and actually put in breakpoints and step through your code debugging tools. We'll mostly be working with this one that says elements. Notice how we can select each one. And when I hover over it, once I get down to nothing up here highlights, but when we get down to the body, things start highlighting. So there it highlights the whole body. And then inside that body, there's a paragraph element. So I can do that and click on it and get information down here. This is cascading style, the default cascading style for that. That's the other part we're not going to get into that's not going to show up in our first example. The cascading style sheets, we're going to write that stuff to say what it looks like. Nothing fancy in the default one here. So we'll use those tools a lot. The words on there. Got hello world. We have more than just that paragraph tag. So another one is that heading tag. I just have the two words. So I'm going to take that paragraph tag off here. Now I'm in a different tag. So maybe H3. So that's heading level 3. So we already saw the head tag, and before long we're going to see one called header, which is like indicates a label section, but we also have heading. And we have the numbers 1 through 6. 1's the biggest, 6 is the smallest, but headings are the big bold words, which we'll see that before long too. Most people are used to Microsoft Word where we have a bold button. Things are either bold or not. But there are many, many, many levels of bold. Programmers just only, at one point in the past, programmers decided the end user should only get one version of bold. But we're programmers, so we have 100 through 900. We choose the number 100 through between 100 and 900 of how bold we want it. We have lots more control over it. There's different bolds. We also have some words. We have bold, bolder, and boldest. A lot of people like those. So maybe I'll write hello. I'll make that level 3 heading data. And then world, I'll make level 1 heading data. So there are different types of data. One's level 3 header, another one level 1 header. And you start to see the pattern of how those tags identify a particular piece of data. We can identify our text and before long graphics data. When I get to the first actual lecture notes as the whole background, going back to the 60s and building up to this, which is going to be next Monday, we'll have some details, but most people are probably anxious to get started. A lot of y'all have probably seen some HTML before. It does get faster. For those who haven't seen me in class before, I start slow because you probably already noticed that I seem to be easily distracted at times. So that way you get used to kind of get used to how I do things, and they'll get faster and faster and faster. So our examples will get much more interesting. I know a couple of y'all have seen some very, very large examples. Like C# in 45 minutes. Entire language in 45 minutes. A couple of y'all have seen that multiple times. But starting off slow and making sense of what these tags do so we know exactly how to use them. It's a way to identify our data. The level 3 heading data, text data, starts here, ends here. We could add some other attributes to them. We'll see that before long. And then the level 1 heading data starts here and ends there. So save that and come over here and reload it, and we can see the difference. We can see it looks different than just the paragraph. Just getting started, previewing things, because the other thing I want to do before we wrap up today, which again, this will probably be the longest day because we had all of those. It's like, okay, that works. Now we need a place to put it because I'm running that. We can see up there in the address bar, C drive users, it's local. Y'all can't go out to the internet and see this page I just made. So we need a place to put that, a place to host it. And there's a couple options. I'm gonna go back to Ivy Learn. So the standardized statewide course shell for this class uses AWS. AWS just gives us a blank server, which means we have to configure that. There's a shortcut where you use default storage, which is 3 times as expensive as a server, which means they only give a $100 budget, which $100 won't make 8 weeks on an actual server. So if we triple that, you pretty much have to turn it on for an hour a day and hope that it's on when I go to grade it or something. Turn it on and off to preserve that budget. Because it's AWS Academy, so it doesn't translate back to your own AWS account if you own one anyway. If you have a place to host one, that'll be fine. I left that in there in case anybody wants to. If you've had the server administration class and you know how to spin up a LAMP stack really quick and just want to have your own Apache server and host that, or if you want to use the S3 buckets, that's on there. Y'all should have received an email about that. Did everybody get an email yesterday? Did anybody not get the email from AWS Academy?
Let me double check. I got the email.
Okay. There's also a $100 budget there, so you can also just go there and play around for AWS because you will probably see that in the world. My recommendation, unless you already know how to do that, is usually we don't do that if we're the site developer. Well, that stuff's set up for us. We just upload our files. That's what's called domain hosting. And there's lots of them out there. You can just go search for them, domain hosting, and see these. Again, my recommendation is usually the best of list, but the best domain hosts are not going to be free, which is kind of our budget in the classroom, right? So maybe I did free domain hosting. Check the best of list, try different ones. At one point, a free domain hosting site I was using shut down, so I had to look for another one. And I found this one in module 1. Yeah, there's 2 setup assignments. One of them just sets up your account, and the other one is actually loading this thing on. But this one, Infinity Free, infinityfree.net, free domain hosting. You have 3 accounts, lots of pages, basically unlimited pages on each account, up to 400 databases on each account, so you can store lots and lots of data there. But they show advertisements on the back end. So we get things that normally would show up in paid for domain hosts. So you'll want to set that up. I already have I just did a factory reset, so my computer doesn't remember any cookies or anything. Doing all that. So infinityfree.net, you set up an account, the normal stuff you're probably used to, give them your email, they send you a confirmation, and eventually you'll see a page like this. And yeah, we're on the background, we're on the server side here, and you'll see those ads. those ads add a lot of tools that we don't normally have in free domain hosting. That's why I like this one, because it's free and I'm used to looking at ads, so it doesn't really seem any different than every other web page I go to. Oh, which that's another thing I like to show. I'll show that for you and how you put those ads on there, because it's really easy money. Build a website, throw it out there, and really Google is holding back advertisers. If Google wasn't already holding back the marketing firms, they would be here trying to interrupt our class to get you to put ads on the web page and then give you money for it. So basically, to make money, to monetize websites, monetize the knowledge from this class, is basically let Google tell the marketing firms to contact you. They send you code, you copy and paste it in your website, and then they send you a check. That's it. You just add your name so that, in a sense, Google stops holding them back. It's really, really easy to monetize these. We'll see that soon. Just make a website, and then they give you the copy and paste code to copy and paste, and then that handles all of that, and you get a few pennies every time somebody clicks on your website, which adds up, especially if you have something that people are going to be interested in checking out. So here, once you set up your account, you'll see something like this. Control panel has all those tools I was talking about. I'll go over here, which I just did a factory reset. Oh, no cookies here. See this long list of tools to scroll through. Email things, set up emails, different file things, different databases, domains, subdomains, all of that. Those are this, or file manager, which I'm gonna go back over, back. So that's one account. I'm gonna create a new account, and after you set up your account on the first one, you'll see something like this. You need to set up some sort of domain, and with the free one, well, good web addresses cost money. You're gonna really good ones can cost a fortune, right? Some of the really high name ones, but you probably a general expectation is about $12. Okay, a cheap one that's not there's not competition for, so like you put your own one there. I have the server turned down, but I have CS Francis 555. That's where I do a lot of stuff. That one costs not a lot of competition for that name, so that costs me $1 a month basically. Gets billed once a year. So names cost money, and those extensions, we're doing a subdomain of what this company already owns. So we put in some meaningful name here. I'm going to call this SDEV. I'm going to call this spring-SDEV153. And notice I used a dash. Human readability is important. Underscores are what programmers usually use, but this is the address for our site, which is what non-programmers need to use. So the dash comes. Search engines actually prefer the dash over the underscore because it knows only programmers use that. And then you can choose from a couple extensions here, not really good ones, but one of those, and then that hopefully that will be the web address to check the availability of it. So that one I picked is good. You will have to make up a unique one. And that's going to be one of your 3 accounts. Give it some sort of label, all of that stuff, and then you create. Y'all can read through those. Everything on that second page is optional. Once you pick a name, everything else is optional. Just choose a name, check the availability of it, and they'll let you know immediately if you can't use it. And once it's created, at the very first, you might have to wait a little while to get to it. There's a button that says Open Control Panel, which is where all those features were. And you go through here, you have to approve that you're okay with looking at the ads on the backside. And occasionally get emails from them, but the only emails I've ever got from them is if nobody visits your site for 90 days, they'll send it dormant. And if it sits dormant for 30 days, you don't, which means you don't ask them to turn it back on, they delete it. That's the only emails I've ever gotten from them. And I've been using this site since 2018, I think. Early in 2018, they don't send a lot of emails, and they show ads on the backside to pay for things like these tools. Nope. What is that? And if you ended up in this control panel one, usually that comes up as the second tab. What you really want to get to is client area. That's there now. I'm going to come back in so we can see how to close those out. I created that account. So if I go to infinity-free.net and hit client area, I was just signed in, so it can be signed in. There's the two accounts. Oh, that's for the WordPress class, the CMS class. Here, so you can see the address on it, and we'll click on this. You see two things: control panel that has all the background stuff. The other one, file manager. Obviously, that's what we want to do. We want to write our files and upload them to the internet. If you're familiar with AWS, you can use that. You'll also have an AWS account for the length of our course, which is another thing I don't like, because the AWS, the school tells the AWS when the dates of this course are. So your AWS websites will shut down at 11:59 p.m. on March 12th. They don't give you any extra time, and that's if you didn't run through the $100 budget for that. So I would highly recommend this, because this is probably what you're going to do anyway, unless you're going to a server admin administrator. Usually the people in the SDEV class right around the hall, right around the corner, same time as ours, they will do all that AWS stuff, and then we just give us a place to upload the files. Which this is Monsta. This is another one. Usually Monsta is not free. Those advertisements we look on the back page paid for a really nice thing. There's some little things here. You'll notice right here, there's a blank file that says do not upload files here. There's a folder called htdocs. This is an Apache web server, and the stuff we want the Apache server to send out to the general public goes in this folder, htdocs. So go in that folder, and then just, see the blank file should be uploaded here. And there's a generic index, which if I copy that website, where's the URL? So the little the URL. So if I come over here and paste that in, why is that not opening? Maybe I need to click the link. Says it's active. I think I have a link to it somewhere. Oh. Okay, maybe it just hasn't gone completely active yet. Anyway, there's a generic default index there. You'll want to replace that. The words index.html, that's a very special file name. That's where servers will look for the start point. So anytime you go into a folder, you want to have a file called index.html. And then all you need is the folder name. Otherwise, you need to put the file name. I'm going to go ahead and delete these. So right click and delete that default thing. Default it. Right click and delete this other one. Don't really need those. And then down here at the bottom, you'll see there's some upload buttons. Upload a file, a folder, or a zip folder, and then you can unzip it when it's up there. Or there's a new, you can just create it right here. There's text editor right here. Index.html. And we have a text editor right here, which has predictive text and all of that. I'll quickly type in the stuff we just looked at. Type in an HTML tag, come down a little and close the HTML tag. Body and all that, I'll just put a paragraph. More stuff. Some words. That's already wrote hello world today, so I can write something else in the tag. So you can edit it right here if you want to. If you do that, notice the save button is down here, or hit the checkbox for autosave. Control S always throws me off here because I'm so used to hitting Control S constantly. But we're on a web page, so if you hit Control S, it tries to download the web page we're looking at, which not what we want. So make sure you hit that save button there. And then whenever the site comes up, if I close that, I called that index.html. So if we go to this URL, then that's what it's going to be looking for. And create new folders. So when you see a slash in the web address, it's just like on your computer file path. The slash means a new folder, and then give it file names. Let me see if that's working now. It might just be, yeah, it probably just needs up to 72 hours. Somewhere they have that wrote down. Sometimes that happens almost instantly, but other times it might take a couple hours. They have it wrote down up to 72, but I have never seen it take 72 hours. I think the longest I've ever seen is maybe 6 hours. And that was a semester when I sent 2 classrooms full of people, like full classrooms, 30 people in each class. So like 60 people, I sent 60 people there on one day. Then it took a few hours. But once it loads up, then we would see that index page. Or the pages we make, we will upload. You just hit the upload button. You should probably have a nice text editor locally. And we saw earlier, we can just run that web page locally and open with a browser. So we can do all the testing, and once it's done, we can upload it, do little bits of debugging. Which one that will show up quite often, we used to, is almost all of our web servers are Linux servers. And most of us are writing on a Windows machine. And Mac recently changed. So Windows is not case sensitive. It doesn't care whether we use a capital letter or a lowercase letter. Mac recently changed that. If you have Monterey or later, Mac's not case sensitive either. But Linux, the server, when we upload it to the server, is case sensitive. So our Windows machine won't care whether we had a capital G or a lowercase g on this file, it'll find it. But the Linux server will say that file doesn't exist. So if it works on your local machine, but not on the Linux server, check your capitalization. That's usually the biggest thing. So that uploaded that, and yeah, it looks like it's going to be a little while before that gets there, but there's the address. So to get to that particular one, it was called greetings.html. I'll just add that on here. So slash, so from our domain, the first slash goes into the htdocs folder. And then you probably want to put some folders there to organize it. Like your module 1 homework, module 2 homework, module 3 homework, all of that. And then eventually the file name, we want to see greeting.html. So it's just a file path, but it might be a couple hours before that opens up. So that's the steps to get that. That's my recommendation. If you're familiar with AWS Academy, I did go ahead and sign that up there, or you will probably see it at some point. So I tend to sign a lot of classes up for AWS Academy. Just go ahead and put everybody in there, and then you can go in here and click around and look and see what's there. You have a $100 budget to give things a try. This class is the Learner Lab. You probably have all 3 of those, Nolan. I don't know who else is in the evening class. But yeah, I put you in the data analytics and machine learning class as well. Under modules, let's see, Learner Lab, which is just a little virtual lab that has things to try and all a bunch of stuff to do. I thought it was here. Oh, maybe that's not where it was. It was under modules. Oh, maybe I have to come in here and activate something. I might have forgot to add an activate button, but you'll see this a button here that when you click it, it automatically starts up some AWS machines to work on. There's only one place, and you'll see a button right here in the middle. It's hard to miss it. But apparently, I forgot to click a button before starting, unless there's something else here. Or unless I just went to the wrong one altogether, because I don't see anybody's names here. I'll double check that. If you've had AWS stuff before, you'll know it. I was paying a lot more attention to this other ones. I can get it from this left. Modules. I'll go in one of these labs. Okay. Actually, it's not started yet at all. I will look into that. AWS, you should have AWS accounts. I'll double check what needs to be done because all the buttons are grayed out. My recommendation would be the domain hosting. It's a lot easier. All we do is upload the files. And whenever the server refreshes, they're not always continuous refreshes. Sometimes it's every couple hours or something. Whenever the server refreshes, there should be a page show up there. And then that's what you're going to do for the homework for the class. You write the page and just submit the URL to it. I figured y'all were ready to get started doing something, so I wanted to go through the steps for that. What do we have? We're like 30 minutes left. This is probably going to be our longest day. We had to talk about all that syllabus stuff and get through that. But we're writing a whole lot of HTML, talking about that. Examples will get quicker. I like to start off slow because y'all probably noticed I'm easily distracted. So if you have something that would be a useful distraction, like a personal interest of yours, or think it might not be covered in the class, let me know. There's lots and lots of stuff we can talk about. Our examples will get faster, but we'll be writing a lot of encoding stuff throughout this semester. Oh, something in the chat room. Oh, in the chat room, somebody's took their site about an hour to show up. It varies. It does vary. It's just whenever the server refreshes. So it's hard to say exactly when that's going to happen, but y'all probably want to get started doing something more interesting than this, right? Get started. That's sort of the basic steps. So you'll build from that. The assignments are all set up in the course shell. Does anybody have any questions before we wrap up for today? It's probably going to be the longest day. I'm usually going to try to leave around an hour of time. I'm just going to be sitting here ready to answer questions. But otherwise, until 3:50, I'm going to be sitting here ready to answer questions. My schedule has office hours from 4:30 to 5:30. So today, though, I might not have those. I've been here since 8:30 this morning, and I have class until 9:50. So I'll have an hour break. I might run home to Clarksville just because at some point in a 14-hour day, maybe it won't seem quite as long by the time 10 o'clock starts to get close to 10 o'clock. But it's first day of the semester. In general, I'll have office hours right after this, so I'll be ready to answer questions if you have them. And we'll wrap up with about an hour with time to actively do stuff. Okay, usually I wait 5 seconds after I ask if anybody has any questions. I assume that's been 5 seconds. I assume silence means no questions. So that'll be it for today. On Monday, we have some lecture stuff to go over, all the background stuff, networking protocol, some quick pass at networking protocol, things like that. I started writing some binary stuff on there. If anybody hasn't seen that and wants to quickly see how we at least write integers in binary, stick around. Otherwise, that was it for today. If you have any questions, let me know. I will see y'all on Monday. Have a good weekend. Stop the recording. Oh, and try to get your domain, try to get the domain set up, whether you're gonna use AWS or that domain hosting. Or if you know another one, that is fine too. As long as your web pages make it to the internet somewhere.